a dual review today of Hyperion and the Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Now, this is not going to be the typical kind of dual review where I talk about one book and then I talk about the other book, because these two books are linked, and I think it makes more sense to talk about the differences between the two, the commonalities between the two, and kind of do a summation of the series as well. So let me just talk about, first of all, what is Hyperion and what is the Fall of Hyperion. They are the first two books in the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons, which consists of 4 books. However, the Hyperion Cantos, even though I honestly have not read the last 2 books yet, I'm reading those this month, it seems that the first 2 books, Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion, which we'll talk about today, form a duology, and Endymion and the Rise of Endymion form a second duology, which is set, I guess, hundreds of years later, or at least a big time jump between the two kind of duologies, even though it's one big series. So because of that, we're going to talk about the first 2 books. I'm also going to address, can you just read Hyperion? Can you just read Fall of Hyperion? The answer to that one is no. The answer to the first one is a little bit more complicated. So let's first talk about some of the things in common between the 2 books. Namely that you start Hyperion and you meet a cast of characters. Their story does not conclude in Hyperion, but goes on into the Fall of Hyperion. So in many ways, if you want to see the full character arc of a lot of these characters, which I'll talk about in the first book, you have to follow them through the Fall of Hyperion. So I guess that's part of the answer being no, that I asked earlier, can you read Hyperion by itself? The answer is no if you aren't satisfied with the conclusion of Hyperion and how that book ends. One thing I somehow failed to mention is that the end of Hyperion almost isn't an ending. It has an ending, but it does not have closure, it does not have finality. So because of that, I think is one of the big reasons why you need to make sure that you do read both of these books. But that's one of the things that they have in common, is you do get to see the characters progress into the second book. You get to live with them a lot more, and you get to see the conclusion of their stories, at least as far as this book is concerned. One big thing that is different between the 2 books is the second book, in my mind, takes a very tonal shift in what this book is like. Hyperion, in many ways, is a literary work of science fiction. It has roots in poetry. It has the big obvious connection that everybody talks about with Hyperion, is that Dan Simmons took as his model Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and he told a story that unfolds like the Canterbury Tales. And that's what Hyperion starts off with. We have these pilgrims that are traveling to see this mysterious shrike, and they all tell each other their backstories. So you get 6 or 7 very different backstories throughout this book, where the priest tells his story, and you get the scholar tells his story, and the consul tells his story. And you have all these very different kind of short stories in this framed narrative that is frankly remarkable. Simmons shows his scope. I mean, if you look at just my small Dan Simmons collection, you can't see. I have one here, Drood, which is a work of kind of literary horror. Dan Simmons is, in many ways, a chameleon of an author. He writes in very many different genres, and a lot of times he puts those genres together within one book. And I don't know if he's done it better at blending genres as he does in Hyperion, this first book, because he essentially has these short stories that are very different. They're very different tonally. The narrators feel very different. The storytelling elements of each of these stories are very different, and I was glued to the page. These stories are fantastic. In fact, I was talking on the Discord with somebody, and they said that they think The Scholar's Tale is his greatest short story, maybe the best thing he wrote, and I believe it. This is a work of science fiction that actually made me cry, and that doesn't happen very often in this genre. But it unfolds in a very different manner than probably anything I've ever read in this genre. But to contrast that with the Fall of Hyperion, the Fall of Hyperion is a lot more straightforward storytelling, but I don't think of it as a work of literary science fiction, but rather a work of almost hard sci-fi, with elements of steampunk in there. It feels very, very different, and I think that's one reason why a lot of people love Hyperion and they don't love The Fall of Hyperion. Because of this tonal shift from this very literary kind of storytelling that Simmons gives us in the first book, the second book, in many passages, felt like very, very hard sci-fi. In fact, just before I turned the camera on, I jotted down some of the things that Simmons throws at you in this second book. We have Farcasters, we have fat lines, we have technocore, we have AI, we have UI, we have World Wide Web, which is, it's not World Wide Web, World Web, which is not the web that we have, but a way that these worlds are all connected. We have the void which binds, which sounds confusing, but is like mind-blowingly brilliant. Datasphere, metasphere, all of these sci-fi concepts thrown at you with a lot of jargon. And that's why in many ways for me it felt a little steampunkish, even though I wouldn't really classify it as that. So The Fall of Hyperion feels a lot different. You get some of these elements introduced in the first book, however. At the very end, some of the stories start to show you kind of a bigger world that's going on, or bigger universe, because this doesn't just take place on the world of Hyperion. But all of those sci-fi elements, I could see it being a challenge for people that are not used to that kind of science fiction, especially if they're really wanting what they got in Hyperion, because what you get in Hyperion, you're not going to get the same experience in Fall of Hyperion. So does that mean that I did not like The Fall of Hyperion? Absolutely not. I really enjoyed it, but you have to be prepared for kind of that shift. I don't think I totally was, so at first I was not on board, but what kept me through all of it were two things. Number one is they're the same characters that you really connected with through their tales in the first book. But the other side of it is just that Simmons does a really great job of pacing this. It felt like every time where he was in one of these scenes where there was all this techno babble and jargon, that he immediately went back to one of the characters, and it was just more straightforward storytelling where we saw what they were doing, how they were dealing with what was happening on Hyperion, and that part of it just kept me going. So the times where I wasn't totally on board with the narrative, because I'm never going to be a huge fan of hard sci-fi or steampunk, those elements made it tough for me, but because it was so well paced, I still really loved The Fall of Hyperion. One of the things that I think people could probably take issue with in The Fall of Hyperion is there emerges a main character that is basically not in Hyperion, and I'm sure that takes some readers aback, because we have these pilgrims that we really got to know, and all of a sudden we have a new narrator that's kind of telling the story, and by the means of kind of who this narrator is, you're able to see all the other stories from this narrator's point of view. I'm trying to be vague to not be spoilerish here. And I could see how people would not like that, but I kind of like this new voice, and I liked the way that this was a kind of a storytelling element, a character that was maybe a plot element, to be able to show you all the different point of views in kind of an elegant manner. Additionally, this character experiences some of the best scenes in the entire book. All I'll say is there are scenes where the narrative is written in bold for a specific reason, and it was some of the most riveting passages I've read in this genre. Another great thing about The Fall of Hyperion. Additionally, The Fall of Hyperion becomes a much bigger tale, and I think that's another reason why some people might have kind of lost interest a little bit in this one. Hyperion is kind of a small tale. You get this framed narrative, and even though each of these different stories tell you different aspects of what's going on in Hyperion, in the world, you don't get to see it all. You don't get to see you don't get to see what the Farcasters are, the fat lines. You don't get to understand things about the technocore and all of that like you get kind of in detail in the second book. So in many ways, it kind of unfolds like a lot of traditional fantasy does, where we start very small and then it just kind of grows into a much bigger thing as you grow with the characters. But he doesn't get you gradually. He kind of just hits you with it in the second book. I would not say it's as complex as one of his other books, Ilium, where it's kind of in media res, where he throws you into the middle of the action and you just have to kind of figure out what's going on. It's not as jarring as that, but it is jarring if you're expecting Hyperion. So I'm trying to prepare all of my Hyperion readers for this second book because it is so different. But one of the things I love about both books that is really driven home in the second book is just an overarching look at humanity, look at consciousness. We look at various things that we as human beings find important, consciousness. There's very interesting discussions about religion in there because this is a futuristic kind of past Earth, what is going on in the world, and you kind of see how it becomes what it becomes. You get to see kind of these different kind of humans that have become almost a different species. There's really great ideas about intelligence and sentience in here. And it's actually remarkable that I feel like Simmons pulled it off. With Ilium and Olympos, just to compare and contrast, I didn't feel like Olympos lived up to the promise of Ilium. But I feel that the Fall of Hyperion, the little nuggets of ideas that Simmons sprinkles in that first book, he expands and I think fully realizes, and I think does a great job in bringing it all together at the very end. And one of the best concepts, which is introduced in Hyperion, is that of time. They're going to see the Shrike, and they're going to these time tombs, which are somehow traveling back in time. And conceptually, the end of Fall of Hyperion, when you kind of finally see this kind of not time travel, but this convergence of these different times going on, it's very, very interesting. One detracting thing regarding time in the Fall of Hyperion, it can be a little confusing because it does jump around just a little bit. You don't know exactly where you are because of these concepts, and I did find that a little disorienting at times. But besides that, I really enjoyed it. So as for these books, Hyperion itself, for me, one of the finest works of science fiction I've read. When I do my top 10 list of science fiction, I have no doubt it's going to be on there. It may not be at the very top, but it'll be in there somewhere. It's one of the greatest works that I've read in this genre. Again, a science fiction work that made me cry. It gave me characters to care for, which sometimes that genre doesn't do very well, while still having great concepts, fantastic prose style. The older I get, the more important a writer's prose is to me, and I just marveled at how well written Simmons wrote this book, and that all these different tales had a different pen behind it. Fall of Hyperion is a cut below, in my opinion, but I think it is a worthy successor. I think if you can overcome the sci-fi things that might be a little more challenging for people like me that are not hard sci-fi readers, I think you'll find some things of merit. In the ending, you see some of these character journeys converge in such a fantastic way. It blew my mind. The moment that two of our stories from the first book converged in such a meaningful way in the second book, it just absolutely blew me away. I tip my hat to Dan Simmons. I hope you enjoyed this dual review. If you've read Hyperion, Fall of Hyperion, I'd love to hear what team you're on. And if you have anything to add to this as well, just of course label any spoilers. I tried to keep this spoiler free for anybody that might want to read these books. I do recommend them. I hope that if you read them, you enjoy them just as much as I did. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Till next time, goodbye.